about to start. There are some seats. Come and find a seat. There are seats. If you have a seat next to you, I feel like I'm in church. Can you raise your hand so that somebody can sit? Thank you. Thank you. There's some seats up here. First of all, I want to thank you all for taking out the time to come out here tonight to take part in this informational meeting in partnership, and I stress partnership, with the Fontana Chamber of Commerce and Southern California Edison, as well as our city personnel, both our fire chief and our police chief. We've all been walking a fine line these few past weeks. The power shutoffs are preventive measures to prevent fires. However, we can't live without power. We can't continuously have our food spoiling, have our children unable to attend school, or have to eat fast food for meals because we're unable to cook. I refuse to allow this to be the new normal for Fontana. Now, to say that, tonight, it is so imperative that we all cooperate. What we don't want are outbursts. I'm bad about doing my fingers or waving, because it's important that everyone hear all the information. Let me tell you how we're going to do this tonight. We're going to start with a statement from our Chamber of Commerce president. I'll tell you why later. Then we're going to actually have a presentation by Edison. And then we're going to do a panel discussion on solutions. And then I'm going to sit down and facilitate a question and answer period with our panelists. But at 7:50, we're going to provide resources over in the gym, which is to the west. And they are set up over there to do one-on-one questions in the event you do not hear your question answered in here. Now, at 8:10, because we agendalize a special council meeting, you can fill out a speaker card, and at 8:30, we're having a special council meeting, and that is where, if you still don't have your questions answered, or you need to talk to us, you will have that opportunity. But that ends at 9 o'clock, so it depends on how many cards to speak we get, on how long of a minute you'll have. But at 9 o'clock, I'm committed, as your mayor, and any of the council members that are still here, I will be in the lobby area, and I will stay here as long as I need to talk with you, to get your information. We've had people emailing us, texting us, social media, and in the majority of cases, we've already gotten back with everyone. But we will get back with you. Now, none of us are happy. Remember, I live here too. I had a house full of folks, some of which I don't like. They didn't have nowhere to go. And that's what families are for. So I was impacted just like all of you were. But we've got to keep in mind, the thing that makes our town so great is we're solution oriented. This is not the end of this tonight. This is providing information, but we're committed, myself and our great council, we're gonna get a solution, because we already know we are in the wind capital of the state of California. So with that, during tonight's meeting, we will hear from representatives of Edison, Fontana Chamber of Commerce, San Bernardino County Fire, and Fontana Police Department. We also have on staff our engineering department, public works, community development, to answer questions in that resource room. We will also be answering questions you provide on the index cards, and I'd like to thank those of you who got in touch with me previously and gave me your questions. It allowed me to prepare the type of questions for the panel. I understand that this is not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution for our city, But together, we're going to find a solution, because we have to protect your safety while keeping your power on. This meeting is just beginning, and I'm going to be working with our lobbyists up in Sacramento, taking your voices and concerns to that great big Sacramento crowd, not in the sky, but in the Capitol building. Tonight's meeting is only 2 hours, so let's address what we can as a group. And I want you to hear from the panelists. You may not agree with everything. When I don't agree, I keep it to myself because I don't want security putting me out. And I need you to act that way too. But we're going to get in that gymnasium and try our best to answer those one-on-one questions. And I also, as I said, invite you to always get in touch with us with any question you may have. So at this time, I want to invite the Fontana Chamber of Commerce President, Mr. Phil Cochran, to give a brief statement on behalf of the entire business community in our great town. Because for whatever reason, and I looked on social media and I talked to a number of you, people felt that the business community got to keep their lights on.
Yes.
So he is going to address that issue. And I can tell you from my personal experience having to go to another place to get my lunch, that is not true. So Phil, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Arcanetta. Sorry. Thank you, Chief. I have an assistant. I want to thank all of you, first off, for being here. I've been in this room numerous times, and it is very seldom filled to this capacity with citizens of Fontana that care about what's going on. Let me quickly introduce, for those business folks in the room, Lori, would you stand up just real quick? This is Laura Martinez. She is the Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce. She does all the heavy lifting and the real work of what's going on. When Aquanetta shared with us that the citizens of Fontana thought that the business community wasn't affected, we, said, that's just amazing because we're in those same circuits. And you'll get an explanation about the circuits tonight and why they do certain things and why the power grids work the way they do. But we just went and surveyed all of our businesses that got shut off, just like you. If you are sharp at the Sprout Center on Sierra and Highland, you probably saw that the Sprouts, the OGs, Raising Cane's, all of those companies got shut off just like everyone else did. They did not have generators. Sprouts had 3 generators. It was the only ones that had it in that particular center. Went through all 3 of their generators, had to go backups. We had restaurants that lost thousands and thousands of dollars worth of their inventory and their food. Just like you, your refrigerators at home, they stopped working, they drained into the floor. That happened to all of our businesses. They also shut off the auto mall, which if you know what it's like, that auto mall drives the economic engine for the city of Fontana. We went up there, and in that short couple days period of time, it cost the business of Fontana right about $500,000. Now, we had still our businesses, if they showed up for work, they have a responsibility. Some of you are employed by them. They had to pay salaries, whether you showed up time. It affected not only their businesses, but the people that work for them. So the business community bear the blunt of everything. And if there's one thing you said, we do not want this to be the new normal for the city of Fontana. And I appreciate that, Aquanetta. So the business community is standing with you, and we're looking for some answers.
Absolutely. Thank you. Let's give Bill a big hand. As mayor, I can't do this alone. I served with 4 great gentlemen, starting with our Mayor Pro Tem, Jessie. If you can stand quickly. Councilmember Philip Cochran, Councilmember John Roberts, Councilmember Jessie Sandoval, our City Treasurer, Janet Kohler Brooks, and I even see the attorney here. We have representation from Eloise Reyes' office. Mahan, you want to stand up real quick? Our supervisor has sent Representative Ben from Supervisor Rutherford's office. And the rest we will introduce as we go along. So, let's get started. For more information on this public safety power shutoff, we want to welcome Southern California Edison Director of the Southeast Division, I hope I got this right, Terry Holloman, and Senior Public Affairs Manager Bob Stein. Here you go, Bob. We'll let him do his presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. My other colleague, Chris Abel, is here that will help out as well.
Okay.
So, Mayor, first I want to thank you and the Chamber for putting on this event. We do a lot of these, and this is probably the biggest crowd we've seen. We've done these type of meetings throughout our service territory. We were here last year, did a community meeting in this area. And Mayor, and one of the things I want to agree with you on 100% is this should not be the new normal. And what I want to talk about is some of the actions we're taking as a company so that this isn't the new normal, that while we're, the public safety power shutoff is here for now, but as we make these investments and into our grid, into our system hardening that we're going to talk about, they will be decreasing. So I agree this should not be the new normal, and we want to talk about that. So, those of us that grew up in Southern California, there used to be a wildfire season. It was like July-ish to October-ish, so it was a wildfire season. That's no longer the case. We're now in a year-round fire season. 10 of the most destructive fires in California's history have happened since 2015. And when you look when they happened, they were in the times that normally don't see fires. November, December, January. And not only are they happening those times a year, but they're just growing rapidly. And we can debate what the cause of that is, but just the conditions on the ground have changed. We're not just between the persistent droughts and the bark beetles. We're having many more. The fires, once they get started, are just growing very, very rapidly. So what I want to talk about is what we're doing again, so that this has not become the new normal, is Edison, as well as our other utilities in the state, are spending a tremendous amount of resources on what we call our wildfire mitigation plan. We filed that with the California Public Utilities Commission last year. It's available to go online and take a look at. But it has three pillars that I'm going to talk about. It's bolstering our situational awareness, enhancing operational practices, and hardening our grid. So there's, going back to our, those high school, junior high school days, there's three parts, there's a fire triangle. You need all three parts of that triangle for a fire to start and burn. You need oxygen, heat, and fuel. So the goal of our wildfire mitigation program, we can't do anything about the wind blowing, but we can address the other two sides of that triangle. The fuel through our vegetation management, and the heat. When I'm talking about heat, I'm not talking about the temperature, but I'm talking about the heat that comes from an electrical source. So the goal of this wildfire mitigation program I'm going to talk about is to eliminate or drastically reduce the heat side and the fuel side of the fire triangle. So one other thing I forgot to mention on the other slide is, the windstorm that we experienced a few weeks ago was one of the severest that the state has seen in the last 10 or so years. In fact, it was the first time that the National Weather Service issued an extreme red flag warning. So it was a very big event throughout Northern California and Southern California. So one thing I want to talk about is that we're doing again to make sure our system is resilient. Is we have a regular inspection program that we do with the company. Every piece of equipment is inspected on a regular basis. Some is every year, some is every 5 years, depending on the piece of equipment and where it is. Well, we made the decision late last year that we weren't going to wait for the normal inspection cycle. So over the course of a few months, we inspected every piece of equipment we have that is in a high fire risk area. So that was 400,000 pieces of equipment we inspected, and as we found issues, we went through and cataloged those, made repairs on them, and in the process of making repairs on them. That first phase was a ground inspection. We're now going through and doing an aerial inspection on those same pieces of equipment, because sometimes you'll see something from looking at the equipment from above that you won't see from looking below. So, what are we doing as far as technology to help prevent the spread of wildfires? One of the things we're doing is installing up to about 160 high-definition fire cameras. And there's one just up in north of the town here in Lytle Creek. If you go to alertwildfire.org, you can see, you can look at these cameras. And if we have time, if you come over to our table over in the other room, I can try and pull it up on the website. Well, what that does is those cameras are constantly scanning the area, and we've got about 130 of them installed so far. And that's since we had 0 of them installed April of last year, so we've got 130 of them installed since then. And what those give the fire departments the ability to do is when a fire starts, they're able to zero in on where that fire is, triangulate with other cameras to determine exactly where the fire is, how fast it's spreading, and what direction it's spreading, so that they can help deploy their resources more efficiently. And that happened last fall with one of the fires, the Holy Fire, that was in Orange County, spotted by our first camera that we installed on Santiago Peak. Other thing we're doing is installing weather stations throughout our service territory. And we've installed about, I think we're up to about a little over 500 of those weather stations. We're going to get to 850 by the end of this year, and then potentially keep going on that program. The reason those weather stations are so important is when I talk about the public safety power shutoff program, is those weather stations give us the ability to determine the weather at a precise location. So rather than relying on the National Weather Service to say wind conditions in San Bernardino County are X, we're able to find out what they are at a very precise location. And when I talk about the public safety power shutoff, I'll talk about how that goes into our forecasting. So all the information from the weather stations, as well as other information we gather from other sources, including what is the fuel, the types of the fuel, what's the fuel moisture content, that all gets fed into some supercomputers that we have, does some very sophisticated model on each of we have about 1,200 circuits throughout our service territory that are potentially impacted by PSPS, and several times a day it goes through and analyzes those circuits to see what the conditions are, and that's what determines for us which of those circuits are monitored, and we give you those phone calls, texts, and emails about, and then which ones we actually, we use then the information from the weather stations and other data to help us make the decision to de-energize. We have a staff of meteorologists that when we get into these conditions are on duty 24/7, monitoring conditions at a real-time basis. So what are we doing to some of the system hardening? The first part was some of the situational awareness I talked about. Now some of the system hardening. One of the things we're doing, and we think this is a very promising technology, and we're going to be deploying it as rapidly as we can, is replacing in the high fire risk areas and in those areas that we're most concerned about, replacing the bare metal wires with what we call covered conductor. And it's a wire, it still conducts electricity, but it's got a plastic type coating on it. So if that same palm frond or metallic balloon blows into those lines, it right now with a bare metal wire could potentially become an ignition source and fall to the ground and start a fire. That is drastically reduced with this covered conductor. Our goal is to have about 1,000 circuit miles of that by the end of the next year, and then looking at several thousand by the end of 2025. So it's a very aggressive program we're doing. We're installing that as fast as we can get the crews to install it, and as fast as we can go out and procure that cable. Other devices we're doing is we're installing what we call reclosures and fast-acting fuses. The fuses are like a circuit breaker in your house. When it detects an overload or something, it shuts off. The fuses that we have throughout our system do the same thing. They detect a momentary interruption, they'll go ahead and shut off so we can go out and investigate what the cause is and repair it. We've always had these fuses on our system, but what we're doing is replacing them with ones that can shut off much, much quicker. Again, because when that tree branch blows into that line, we want the line to shut off automatically as fast as it can to reduce the chance of a fire happening. We're also installing what we call reclosure switches, and we're looking at this area to see where we can install additional switches. But what these do is give us the ability to isolate what part of the circuit when we make the decision to de-energize. These give us the ability to hopefully reduce the size, the impact of that de-energization. So instead of shutting off an entire circuit, we're able to shut off part of it. And again, we're going through the analysis now to see where we can install additional of these reclosures to minimize the impact. And one of the things I do want to mention when we do talk about public safety power shutoff, what we do is a very surgical approach. So rather than shut off entire communities, we shut off circuit by circuit. So we'll look for individual circuits and shut that one off. And that's why you might have seen, you know, your neighbor or some of the business in the area has power, that we were able to isolate that, and that circuit was not experienced, it was either not in a high fire risk area, or was not experiencing the conditions that a different circuit might have been on. So vegetation management. One of the biggest causes of fires when they come in utility lines is a tree branch, a palm frond, a eucalyptus branch will either fly into our lines from way outside our right of way, or potentially, if it's close to our right of way, blow into the lines. So we have a very aggressive vegetation management program where we're going out and we inspect over 900,000 trees annually, trim or prune 700,000 of those, and we're also in the process of expanding our clearance zone. The PUC requires us to trim to 4 feet plus 1 year's growth. We're expanding that following the PUC's recommendation to 12 feet where we can. Another program we've put in place this year is what we call our hazard tree removal. So we might find a tree that's outside of our right of way, one that we don't have the automatic right to go in and trim. Let's just say you have a 30-foot tree, eucalyptus tree or something that's outside of our right of way, that's dead or dying. It's like maybe 15, 20 feet outside our right of way. It's dead or dying. And if that does continue to die or lose health, it could blow into our lines. We'll go out and work with that property owner and agree, if they're willing to, that we'll go ahead and remove that tree at our cost. So here's the question we always get. Underground. Why don't we just underground all these lines? So I'll talk about this. So there's advantages and disadvantages to underground. Well, I'll tell you, we are going through a process. And if we identify maybe a section of a line, the best way, most efficient way to buy down that risk or to reduce the chance of fire starting is to go underground it, we're going to look at it. So there's advantages and disadvantages to underground. So the advantages are it does help reduce the chance of a fire. I mean, a tree branch can't blow into a line if it's underground. It is more reliable. They're less subject to outages because again, those tree branches can't blow into them, squirrels can't fly into them, birds can't fly into them, so it's more reliable. The other thing is, it's more aesthetic. It's more aesthetically pleasing not to have those lines out there. Now there's disadvantages as well. So one of the disadvantages, as I said, it's more reliable, but the problem is when there is an outage, it takes longer to repair because rather than just driving down the street and look at where you can see, oh, there's the problem right there. We got to go in and open vaults, so we can go underground and help find where the piece of equipment is. And then once we identify where the problem is, we might have to dig up the street. So it takes longer to do the repairs. Another one is it takes us much longer to design and build those lines. We have to go out and acquire property rights, easements, and then it takes just much longer to do the engineering because a lot of times you have to move water lines, phone lines, other things that are in the way. Another disadvantage is cost. And when I talk about cost, I'm talking about cost to our ratepayers, to the homeowners and businesses that are our customers. It costs about $3 million a mile to underground the line versus we can replace that same line with the overhead conductor for about $430,000. And again, that's cost to you, the ratepayers. So the public safety power shutoff, what we're all here tonight to talk about. Again, the reason we want to talk about this, what we're doing with system hardening, is because again, we agree with the mayor, it should not be the new normal. And I spent the time talking about earlier, is everything we're doing to lengthen the time that we have to do these public safety power shutoffs. So the purpose of these public safety power shutoffs is to de-energize lines to prevent ignitions. It's used during elevated fire conditions. So it's a combination of wind, humidity, fuel conditions, and other factors. That as I mentioned, we have the weather modeling we do to help us determine when we're going to do that. And it primarily impacts circuits that are in the high fire risk areas, but it does impact customers. That sometimes a substation may start off in a non-high fire risk area, but then travel up through the high fire risk area. So that whole circuit could be de-energized. But as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at other opportunities for us to go in and put these switches in to minimize the size of these outages. So the decision points. How do we make the decision to de-energize? 3 buckets of information we use. The first one is all the science stuff, all the weather stuff I talked about, all the weather modeling. What's the wind speed? What's the humidity? What are the fuel conditions? And other issues. That's the first bucket of information we use. 2 other buckets of information we use. One is, our goal is before we de-energize, we'll have a qualified utility worker out observing. What are they seeing in real time? Are they seeing, yeah, it's windy, but things are pretty calm. We're not seeing much vegetation blowing through the air, and it's good. Or is it the opposite? It's getting windy out here, and they've got their handheld wind gauges to help monitor, and they're seeing, there's vegetation blowing through there. There's lines slapping together. So that's the other piece of information. The third piece of information we use is I'll talk about our notification process. But we started dialogue with our emergency operation partners about 3 days before we considered doing this public safety power shutoff. So we want to know what else is going on. Is there another public safety condition going on that that the first responders are requesting us to keep power on? And we've done that recently. In outages up in Ventura County, we were able to delay outages or do some rerouting to assist with fire conditions and evacuations. So all 3 of those are the 3 decision points. The decision to de-energize is we enter into what we use our incident command system, which is a standard system used by fire agencies and local governments and state governments and national government. And all 3 of these factors are considered. What are the weather conditions? What are we hearing from our folks on the ground? And what are we hearing from our first responders? So the ideal timeline. I want to stress, this is ideal. We can't always predict the weather 100%. So our notification process is what we strive to meet. And we have not, I'll be the first one to admit, we haven't met 100%, but we're trying our best. We're doing pretty good, and after each event, we're learning more, potentially looking back to see, okay, why weren't we able to give the notification there? What were the conditions, and see how we can improve it. So our timeline is, so about 4 to 7 days out, our meteorologists are observing trends that may be happening. We're looking at National Weather Service forecasts and observing something that's happening. But these are sort of like the forecast from your local newscaster. The 7 days out, you're not paying a lot of attention to it yet. And what we're doing there is this is sort of our get ready stage. So at this point in time, we're observing potential conditions, identifying circuits that could be impacted, making sure we have the resources in the field to pre-patrol those lines, patrol those lines, and putting our incident management team that manages that situation on alert that they may be called into duty. 3 days out, we have a little better idea, or a better idea of the conditions, where the potential public safety power shutoffs are going to happen. But it's not really completely defined yet. But what we do at this point in time is give our public safety partners a notification. So public safety partners are our cities, our counties, our fire agencies, our law enforcement, hospitals, water agencies, communication agencies, schools, and there's some that I'm forgetting. But we give them a warning out in about 72 hours that this is possible. We then our incident management team that I mentioned that manages the public safety power shutoff for the company. We report to our emergency operations center, and begin the process of the notifications, and then begin our entire monitoring process. So 2 days out, again, these are ideal conditions, under ideal conditions, or under the conditions that we anticipate, we begin our customer notification process. So we first start with, again, our public safety partners, first group that get called, and these all happen within within probably, depending on the size of it, very close, within an hour or so, once we start the first one to the last customer gets notified. We then begin notification to our critical care customers, and those are customers that are on some type of a life-saving device. And this is a program that we have in place right now. If a car hit a pole or there's an outage, we go through it. Once we identify how long that outage is going to be, if it's going to be extended one at a time, those customers are called through an automated dialing system to let them know of the extended outage. If we don't get an answer, we pick up the phone and call them. And if we don't get an answer then, we send someone out to their door to knock on their door to let them know about the outage. The difference here is we're starting this process 2 days ahead of time. We then call all the rest of the customers. So one thing I can't believe I haven't done yet is in the resource room, which is in the gym, we have some folks from our call center. If you have not given us your updated contact information, you can do a couple of things. You can go to our website, sce.com/PSPS. There's a banner on the bottom you can click to update your your contact information. Or I think mentioned, we've got some folks that are in the gymnasium that can update your call information. Because if you're like a lot of folks, when you set up your Edison account 15 years ago, you had a thing called a landline. You got rid of that landline. You now rely on your cell phone for everything. But you haven't told us you've gotten rid of your landline and rely on your cell phone. So come give us the best phone number to call you at, and phone number to text you, and email, and we will send all 3 of those notifications out to you to inform you of the potential for public safety power shut-off and then the actual shut-off. We then repeat that same process 24 hours out. We then, the same order. We then, if power is shut off, we'll call you. Now we're working to try and do what we call an imminent warning, but which would be an hour to 2 hours out. Sometimes we're able to do it depending on the conditions. But as I mentioned, the decision to de-energize is in large part based on those crews in the field, crews that are in the field, and we're relying on that real-time information. But we'll call you then when the power's off. The reason we're calling you to tell you the power's off, I know you know the power's off, is so you're not necessarily calling our call center. We want to let you know that the power is off. We will then, depending on how long the outage goes, do updates throughout the time. And then when we turn the power back on, we're going to notify you again. Because this time, if we call and tell you the power's on and it's not on your house, at your house, we want you to call our call center because there may be a problem with the line that's serving your house. Now, one thing I want to mention is, before we re-energize, we have to go out and inspect that line. So just because the winds have stopped blowing and the conditions are back to normal, doesn't mean we're automatically going to go in and flip the switch. Because we want to make sure in that period of time that the power was off, that there's no damage to the line, that potentially a line didn't break or vegetation did not blow into the line. The last thing I have for you, and I think we have, we have copies in the gymnasium. It's some websites for you to come. The one thing we didn't talk about here is how important it is to have your emergency plan for any type of emergency. I mean, power shutoffs are just one type of an emergency you can face. We're going to, we've got, as this area knows very well, we can have fires that you need to plan for, and earthquakes. So that's a very quick sprint through this presentation. And with that, I will turn it back over to the mayor.
See, we got power, okay, great. Did I say we got power? That got you all going here. And by the way, don't be texting my family telling me I said I don't like them. I love when they come over and stay with me 4 days. Somebody did that. I'll find out who that was. At this point, I have a couple of questions because now we have a good overview of why this is kind of happening. And what I did is I kind of investigated all of you. You're great. You go online, you email us, you call us. And I knew this day was coming, so I kept your questions in my head. Worked with our great staff. So I'm happy to say that most of the questions I'm going to ask, you already gave them to me. But what would you say, Edison, to residents that believe the outages are a direct result of a blanket mandate stemming from the fires in Northern California? Who's going to answer that?
So that's not the case. We've always had this protocol in place. We've always had this PSPS protocol in place. But we're using it more recently, because of the conditions that we're seeing with the very dry vegetation. As again, I talked about the 12-month fire season and just how fast fires spread now. So as a result of that, it's a program, again, we've always had it in place, but it's something that we felt in order to help protect public safety was important. We started using it more frequently than we have in the past.
Okay, excuse me. Remember we said no outbursts. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Let me just add that, for us, something has changed in the environment. We've always had wind, I know you know that, but the wildfires that have developed as a result of an ignition source, Bob said it earlier, 10 of the most severe wildfires have occurred over the last 4 years. So something has changed for us, and that's really what's caused us to change and rethink what we're doing. We've had the ability to de-energize circuits in the past if we were concerned about an unsafe condition. But this is really different for us now, and so we're doing a number of things. Bob brought up quite a few of them. Investment in the grid continues, but PSPS at this time is a part of that process. That is not something that we want to continue doing in the long run, but it's a difficult choice for us. We don't want to turn power off. It's almost like there's two bad outcomes. One is the power goes off, or two is there's the potential for catastrophic wildfire. And for us, the risk is too great for the potential for harm for the public and for structures. So that's really why we're doing this.
Okay, now, one of the bigger questions that everyone has is, how is it that one side of the street might have power and the other side is not?
Yeah, so there's a number of reasons why this could happen. It's possible you could have one side on a different circuit than across the street. Just depends on the configuration when the neighborhood was built. And it's possible that one circuit is experiencing different conditions at a different location. So circuits are lengthy, and the wind conditions aren't uniform throughout that entire circuit. But somewhere along that circuit, we may be experiencing conditions that are extreme and that are concerning, and so we may have to re-energize, whereas the other one may not have that same condition. There are also times when we do look to try to isolate and sectionalize our circuits to minimize the impact, reduce the number of customers that might experience an outage. We're working at that. We're continuing to evolve in our process. We know that there's some opportunities. We could have probably minimized the impact to customers greater than we have today, but that could also be the case. So we may have sectionalized a circuit and a portion is out and the other portion is on.
One more question. How or can residents receive reimbursement for generators, backup batteries, groceries lost from the power outages? Excuse me. There you go.
Yeah, so we have a claims process where you can absolutely file a claim for loss of those things that the mayor mentioned. We actually have some of the forms that we'll have in the gymnasium. There's also information on our website about that process. So that's certainly something that we will take a look at your form or your claim and evaluate it and let you know.
One of the real questions that kept coming up, if you have solar panels, do they continue to work when the power's out? Come on now, we've been doing good, everybody. Let them answer the question, okay? Got from the time. Go ahead, sir.
The answer is generally no. There's a protective device between our system and the solar panels. That's really for a couple of reasons: to prevent backfeed into the grid, to protect our workers who think the circuit's de-energized when in fact it may not be, but also if there's potential wire down or some other damage to the circuit, it could also be an ignition source. So those devices should operate automatically when the power is de-energized.
Okay. I'm going to go to the city right now, but there was a rumor going around that the medical baseline, there was a hearing at the PUC going on to eliminate the medical baseline. And I verified with the PUC myself that that is not accurate. There are no hearings to eliminate the medical baseline. So let's get rid of that rumor. I'm going to talk to the city now about these generators. We had a couple of incidents in the city where everybody was jumping on generators and probably had never dealt with them before. Do people need a permit to plug in the generator at their houses or businesses?
A temporary generator that just plugs in does not require a permit because it's removable, it's not permanent. So there no permit is required. But there are a bunch of safety items that you need to know about. If the power goes out, your main breaker is still on. So if you plug in a generator and you're hooked up to a circuit and that power comes back on, you didn't turn that main breaker off, you can blow that circuit up. So you gotta be very careful. So there's a temporary generator, there's different sizes. I mean, you can get one that can almost run your whole house, but you gotta be very careful. Like I said, you turn off the main breaker, and you have to pick what circuits you want to use. So if you get a very small generator and you plug it in and it's going back to that circuit that's hooked into the main panel, you're gonna try to energize every single breaker on that panel. It's not gonna do it. You're gonna burn up your cord, your generator's gonna burn up, something's gonna happen. So you're gonna have to see how big that generator is, what it will do, and you have to pick and choose which circuits you wanna run. You could do your refrigerators, you can do some lighting, something like that. And also you have to know if you're gonna just hook in a generator to one circuit plug, a lot of these generators will have a 30 amp plug in them. They'll have what's called a twist lock, and you cannot take a 30 amp coming out of your generator and plug into a 15 amp circuit, because that's gonna heat that circuit up and it's gonna burn up. So you gotta be very careful what you do on that. So the best place actually to go is to your air conditioning circuit, because that is typically the biggest circuit in your house, and you can hook up more power to it and not burn things up. So, and then once you're done, you just unplug it and you disconnect everything. Once power comes back on, you turn your main power back on, your main breaker, and then all the other circuits, okay? Now, if you want to put in a permanent generator to your home, which will require a transfer switch and everything, then yes, that does require a permit. And that will take plans, and we'll have to make sure that the generator meets the noise decibels, so it doesn't impact all the neighbors and everything. And typically, that is all included with that generator when you get it. So it can all be done very quickly. A lot of times, a couple hours, we can get you a permit. But you also have to remember, if it's an emergency situation, and it happens on a Friday, Saturday, or something, you are allowed to go ahead and do it, and then come in Monday. And if you're going to do the full power system, then you submit your plans and stuff at that time. The code does allow emergency situations to get taken care of immediately, and then get your inspections and permit afterwards.
And Steve, you're always available at the city to answer those questions, correct? Now I'd like to have our fire and police talk about, in the event we have any emergency evacuations, what Ready Fontana is, and what do you do when you get to the intersection, there's dark traffic signals. And one of the main questions that has come out of here, who's protecting us when it's just completely pitch black? Are the officers out on the street, or what's the plan?
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to start with, before we evacuate, the key for everybody is to be prepared, to have a plan in place. We have a program on the fire departments. You can look at our website. It's a Ready, Set, Go program. It's ready is being prepared, and set is planning, having that plan in place. So if we do have to call for evacuations, you have the plan in place. You know where to go. Where are you going to go once you do evacuate? And then if we pull that trigger, we say, we got to go, everybody go. You're ready to go, you know where to go. So that's the key, is to be prepared. Ready Fontana is the emergency management program that we've been building a very robust plan this last year. The city has put together an emergency operations center. It's a state-of-the-art facility at the City Hall campus. That is built in place. We have Amina Mears as our emergency management officer for the city. And we coordinate that center with the county emergency operations center, and then they'll coordinate with the state emergency operations center. So with our emergency management plan, readyfontana.org is a site you can go to. You can contact us at ready@fontana.org. And if you have any questions pertaining to that, you will see some information if you're interested in CERT, which is a community emergency response team. That will provide some training for you to help you in a disaster. We are kind of talking about wildfires today, but this pertains to everything. If you're talking earthquakes, you name it, CERT will prepare you for that. We have a council member just recently went through that, and he could definitely let you know that that was some valuable training. We also have Until Help Arrives classes. We have Sound the Alarm program that is coming up with helping people get smoke detectors into their homes. And we have a Stop the Bleed class that we offer through that program. So if we do have to evacuate, we coordinate with my good friend here, the police chief, Billy Green, and they will come to our command post when we do have a fire in place. And we have to pull the trigger to go. We let them know, hey, these are the areas that we have to evacuate. We need to evacuate right now. We'll show them the grid, and they will send their units out in a very rapid fashion using their PAs on their patrol cars, and they'll be letting you know it's time to evacuate. Everybody evacuate. They'll also, if we have helicopters available, if the weather permits, we'll have a helicopter up in the air as well, coordinating that. And if you don't live in Fontana, it pertains the same. I see some of our neighbors from Lytle Creek. If you're from some other communities like Rosina Ranch, same thing happens. We talk the same talk with the county sheriff. It's our department that will provide protection for you in those areas as well. And then if you're in San Bernardino, we coordinate that with San Bernardino PD. We have all the police agencies come to our command post. We have a very robust cooperation with our police agency. So once they do that, we want you to leave early if possible before we have to pull that trigger. And there are some routes that you want to have some routes in mind of where you're going to go. The main arteries are probably going to be your best route. However, have some alternate routes in place, and that's part of your plan. And then you want to be able to refer. We have this nice little app called the Ready SB app. This is a little handout you'll see at our booth. And this is a great app. If you do evacuate, we will update where evacuation centers are in place. So if you don't know where to go, you have no place to go, you can refer to this app and that will guide you to where the evacuation centers are in place. This facility here is often an evacuation center. However, if it's in the path of the fire, we'll probably defer to a different evacuation center. So that will give you up-to-date information. It provides you escape routes as well. And so it'll show you the green lines like the Google Maps or Apple Maps will show you today. It'll show you how green they are, or if there's congested traffic, you'll see that in this app as well. And they'll provide you with updated information on what's going on with the disaster or with the emergency. So if you want more information, you can definitely go to any app store. Ready SB is the app that will provide that information to you. ReadyFontana.org, and then SBCFire.org is the county fire's website that will provide additional information for you. So with that, I'll go ahead and have the police chief, because now it'll become a police matter once we evacuate you.
Good evening. So as the police department, we have 3 roles in an evacuation. We assist our fire friends with taking direction from them, and they'll identify what grids need to be evacuated. And we'll do that through PAs. We also will go door to door to ensure that the residents have been notified for the evacuation. The ultimate decision to evacuate is yours. However, you need to be mindful that if you decide to remain behind, you could hamper the emergency response. We're not going to be able to get to medical aids for folks that chose to remain behind, when the primary being to prevent further structure damage. But we will knock on doors, we'll make announcements, and we'll also assist. The second phase we'll control traffic. So we might change all lanes into outbound traffic and prevent inbound traffic into a particular area. And then once that's all done and the evacuation, your neighborhood has been evacuated, then we'll do looting suppression, and we'll increase our patrols in those areas that are evacuated to ensure that your property is as safe as it can possibly be from looters or people that might have bad intentions. We will control access into the area during evacuations, as well as doing proactive patrols within. But what we've been dealing with recently with the power outages is the batteries that control the traffic lights when the power is out, that they've been out for such an extended period of time that the batteries have died and the traffic signals have stopped working. So I would like to just make all you folks here and all those at home aware that when you do approach an uncontrolled intersection, you should treat it as a 4-way stop sign. If you know that, for example, at Sierra Lakes, if the power is out there, that's a 4-way controlled traffic light. When you come to that intersection, you recognize that it's out, you should stop. Obviously, it makes good common sense. You don't want to go through that intersection. And then if there are multiple cars at multiple different access points, then you would treat it just like a stop sign. Whoever gets there first gets to go first. So we did unfortunately have some traffic accidents during the last power outage, but we can greatly reduce those just by having the awareness that we do need to treat those like an uncontrolled intersection.
If I could add, one thing I forgot to bring up was that we do have a reverse 911 system. In Fontana, it's called Code Red. On the readyatfontana.org website, you could definitely sign up for that. If you do have a cell phone only, you don't have a landline phone, you want to register your device there. If you're not in Fontana, in any of the county areas, we have the 10 system in the county area, so that you could also get on our website and register for that. The other thing I wanted to elaborate also is if we do call for you to evacuate, we ask that you do evacuate. We often get residents that don't want to evacuate, and that becomes a problem for us as firefighters. It adds an additional hazard or element because our priority is life safety. So if you stay in the house, then you become a bigger problem for us. So we will have to risk more of our firefighters to save you, and we don't want to do that. We want to protect your property. We want you to be safe. We want you to evacuate. Do as you're told, and we have our police officers that will take care of your property. Our firefighters are there to take care of your property as well. So please do that.
In the event of a large-scale incident, like we had in the Grand Prix fire years back, we have a wonderful mutual aid program with all of our partners in neighboring cities and law enforcement. And we had San Bernardino County sheriffs, Rialto guys, San Bernardino officers that were in here assisting with evacuations, and then we returned the favor to them as the fire continued to move west, and we were doing evacuations in other cities as well. We'll go to a tactical alert where we're on, all of our officers will be 12 on, 12 off, where people won't be going on vacation, and we'll have maximum deployment to ensure that we're as safe as a community as we can possibly be.
Thank you, Chiefs. One last question about your website. Can you explain that?
Sure. And first, I just want to, before I answer that, thank the mayor and the chamber and the city for putting this on. We're happy to come out and do these meetings, and really appreciate the partnership that the city mentioned, that the mayor mentioned. So our website that's been in place the past few outages has not been where we'd like it to be. So we have a new website that's about to be launched. That will allow you to get much better detailed maps, and also able to enter your address to see if you're potentially impacted. So that's scheduled to come online very, very soon. And we're also going to start employing the Nextdoor app, as well as our traditional Facebook, Twitter to help publicize potential PSPS.
All right, thank you. I would ask the panelists to please go to the breakout room because we're going to be sending people there in a few minutes. Let us give our panel a big hand, everyone. Thank you. And then for those of you that may not come back to the council meeting, let me speak on behalf of myself and my great colleagues. I want to assure you all that I have heard all your concerns. I live here too. I do not want to be our new normal, and with your help, we're going to work this solution out. This is a long-term strategy we're putting together. We're going to be working with Cal OES. I'm thankful tonight we have representatives from our Congress, Norma Torres, Julie Leyba is here. But after tonight's meeting, the next step is going to be taking our concerns to the state capitol, because that's where the action will begin. But some crucial items came out tonight. We have to all be prepared. I no longer go to the store without bringing back water now. I take it very seriously. And I've been getting extra food. It's one thing when you live by yourself, when you have to help family, we got to feed them. At the same time, I invite all of you to go to the breakout and get that one-on-one time. That's why I'm adamant about our time. I'd like to apologize if anybody felt they were insulted when I asked you to please not comment. When you have this many people in the room, everybody needs to hear it. You can holler at me later. It's okay. But at this time, those of you, if you would leave out to those doors there, we're not going to have the back door open. You can go and talk to Edison, our police, fire, and we've got information in that gymnasium that a lot of you may benefit from. And if you'd like, you can come back at 8:30. For 30 minutes, we're gonna have our council meeting. And if you'd like to come back then, you'll be able to fill out a card. I'll see how many we have. We'll divvy up the time and hear your concerns. I'd like to thank all of you great residents, and please give all of yourself a big hand. Thank you.